The Tarp says, "Hi lads, am I right in thinking you don't really believe in main gaining? Holy moly. Slow cuts and slow bulks for athletes, weightlifters, as well as bodybuilders, theoretically to maximize performance at a given weight? Cat."
So when it comes to this, right, is we do in certain circumstances think main gaining is definitely possible. I wouldn't use the word, just to be clear, because obviously sometimes we get misquoted in places, so we always try and ensure that we're not getting misquoted. Main gaining is definitely possible. And actually, in a lot of the populations of people that we're training, a lot of the time they haven't done a focus of hypertrophy. So technically, hypertrophy is energy independent. So technically, you can gain muscle in a deficit. It's primarily a stimulus, but nobody who's not railing gear realistically outside certain circumstances is gaining much, if any, meaningful muscle mass. Now, the thing is, when we get people very rarely are doing hypertrophy phases, let's say you've been weightlifting for 5 years, you haven't done a hypertrophy phase. Let's say you're a really talented track and field athlete or whatever, and you haven't really tried to gain a lot of muscle mass. What you'll see sometimes is they can keep the calories the same and then start to introduce you a more hypertrophy focused style of programming, different to that kind of strength and performance and power output. And what you a lot of times you'll see in those athletes is that they'll gain muscle mass. However, the drop off of this is pretty steep after a couple of months. So depending on their genetics, depending on how much muscle mass they have now, how close to their muscle mass potential they might be at, depending on their height and all that, and what other kind of training they're doing, and how many resources they can dedicate to the hypertrophy phase, you can definitely see main gaining happening, which is technically, if you're staying at a similar body weight or you're gaining a little bit, is somewhat of a recomp. So the fact that this can happen would say it can happen, but in reality, a bulk or slight surplus is definitely something that benefits a lot. Now, when it comes to maximizing performance and strength training, gaining body weight is an absolute no-brainer. It is hugely beneficial for multiple reasons. You've got things as short-term as like glycogen stores. You've got things like changing your leverages. So you got more favorable and more stable leverages. You improve your proprioception, so you're more stable. And then obviously you gain more muscle mass. And if you have more muscle mass, you have more potential for strength training. It's very hard to meaningfully see a change in your muscle mass for most people outside of that specific scenario that we saw there. The other scenario then would be someone who was before had a lot of muscle mass, stopped training, and then returned to training. At an athlete like this recently, he was very strong before, stopped training for 2 years, ended up working like 14, 15-hour days on an oil rig and lost like 15 kilos in body weight. I started training again really diligently, recently got back to normal sleep, hasn't changed his calories at all, just kept maintenance calories going. We specifically stuck at maintenance calories. It's something we talked about and made sure. And he's ended up gaining like 5 or 6 kilos. He's absolutely yacked at the moment. So that muscle memory is real. But outside of those two kind of specific scenarios, most of the time, main gaining is something that if you really are at consistent level of calories and really at maintenance body weight, it's just very, very hard to actually see meaningful progress in muscle mass over a time frame where we actually want to see it when we're training. So we're definitely, specifically in the athletes we touch, at least, wow, specifically in the cohorts that we metaphorically touch, in the
We
cohorts
intellectually touch them.
that we intellectually massage their brains, is that we like a slight surplus. We're definitely not fans of a mega bulk. I accidentally did that in fourth year in college. It was completely accidental. I skipped a whole weight class. I went from 85 to 105 in the space of about 2 months. Specifically, what happened there was I was technically working two jobs and I was training as much as possible. And I was training for European under-23s later that year. Started that year in January. I started working in a pharmaceutical factory. At the same time, I was farming at the weekends because I was still living at home, and I was training 5 days a week. And I was eating like 3.5, 4,000 calories, and I was still ripped. And then I went back to college, and then I obviously stopped the full-time job. I went working, I was just working a little bit at home on the weekends in the farm, but I was just studying and training and lounging around. And my body weight literally went through a second puberty where it went from, I think it was like 88 to about 100 kilos in like 6 weeks. And then 3 or 4 months, about 6 months after that, then I was about 105 kilos, which is great for performance, not great for body composition, but specifically performance is great for it. And yeah, so super bulks are definitely a bad idea. Low caloric surpluses, I think, are very, very useful, because if you ever get to the stage where you're like, oh, damn, I'm looking a bit too fat or a bit too fluffy, you don't like that, you can quickly peel it back a little bit or stay there for a little bit and go up again. But main gaining / body recomposition, definitely possible. In most cases, unfeasible, or certainly just not something most people can attain with their training. So it can happen, but we're definitely fans of slow bulks and huge fans of really slow cuts. That's something we're big fans of. It just, unless you've an urgent weight class or competition to get to, really aggressive fast cuts, and most times do not work out. If you have a lot of body weight to lose, you need to accept the fact that in most scenarios, a prolonged cut is a better option for performance, your health, mental well-being, and preserving muscle mass when you get there.
Yeah, the problem with the fast bulking in particular is you just end up getting really fat.
Oh yeah, you do.